sometimes in the faith, in Christianity, we have let society take our stories and kind of make them into these beautiful Hallmark images. And as a result of that, when people in the faith find out that, whoa, that's not true, that's not accurate at all.
The shepherds and wise men never met each other.
What happens is people start to find that, because again, they would be baby Christians, people weak in their faith would find that and say, this is all wrong.
Yep.
This is all falsehood.
Yep.
It's not right.
And literally, in this case, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Because what has happened is people have started to believe that society has the right interpretation of the Bible. Hi, I'm Parker Miley.
I'm Tim Benjamin.
This is the Rage Podcast, where today we are going to take a switch from what I told Tim, and we are going to talk about deconstructionism.
This is the first I've heard of this. Okay.
This will actually go into the topic that me and Tim, I hope Tim wasn't planning hours. He wasn't planning hours for this episode today. We never planned. But anyways, I was putting some thought in behind what we could talk about today. We are in the second week of Advent now. I thought it's maybe time to mention something Christmassy. You know, I guess we have to do that.
Season's greetings.
I think it has some form of a part that we have to mention about.
Yeah, it's in the contract. Yeah.
And so, anyways, I was talking to someone last night, and there's a lot of confusion sometimes around the Christmas story when you read the biblical accounts.
Yeah.
So technically Matthew and Luke, right? I mean, and if you're Tim, you're gonna say all of them start with some form of Christmas story, but
not really.
Yeah, kind of.
Mark and John are not as popular as Luke and
John's got a good
Matthew.
one, but anyways. Matthew and Luke, they actually go through and talk about the angel visiting Mary.
Yeah.
And
the Hallmark nativity scene comes from Matthew and Luke.
Yep. And many of you, maybe, and even some of the churches here in town, and even the I don't know what this is in front of the church. Is this an insurance agency? Mm-hmm. The insurance agency right in front of the church has this beautiful nativity scene out. I mean, it really looks nice. I haven't put out the church's nativity scene because theirs just kicks our butt every time, and I feel like that's weird. That the
and it's really cold outside too.
And I feel like the insurance agency and the church, you know, I mean, they're going to kick our butts no matter what. And we technically hold the rights to the story.
So we have decided to forfeit.
Yeah,
so.
we hold the rights to the story, and they're kicking our butts at it. So anyways, if you look at the nativity scene, you will see a woman, normally a depiction of Mary. You'll see a man. Most likely Joseph, very close to Mary, close to the little manger where a baby Jesus would be laying. And then you'll have maybe a shepherd. If you're have a very nice nativity scene.
If you're an insurance company.
Yeah. You will have a massive star.
Yes.
A massive star hanging down. You will have maybe a drummer. A drummer boy sometimes. Some nativities I've seen.
That. Okay.
Believe it or not, the nativity scene out at Walnut Grove has a drummer boy. Where's that come from?
I
don't know.
Did not read that part. Okay.
Neither did I.
Okay.
All right. So now we're starting to get into the image here. Okay.
Okay.
And then you might have a shepherd. All right. And he would be somewhere near the animals. And then you have these three, always depicted as fat men carrying boxes with fancy hats.
Yes. Always the fancy hats. Yes. I was going to say that too. Always fancy hats.
And I don't know if it's necessarily that they're fat, but they have these robes that are so big. Yeah, they look like they shouldn't be allowed to walk.
It sounds like they have a Christmas song named after them called "We Three Kings."
Yeah. We Three Kings. Okay, and we see that image a lot. Now they're all normally all together at the nativity scene with the star above their heads, and it's a nice image, right? And if you read the scriptures, you'll see majority of them characters do have a role in some time manner. However, the timeline does not add up.
Yep. And you'll never find that picture depicted as we just described it anywhere in the Bible. There's a piece from here, a piece from there, and that's how it's put together.
And with being a younger person, being 19 years old, I don't know what am I Gen X?
No,
Gen Z. I'm Gen Z.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Gen Z, all right? My generation loves to do what is called deconstructionism, right?
Oh, do they ever.
Taking away some of those stories and things that people like Tim have told us and lied to us about life. And we like to deconstruct that the wickedness that Tim's generation has put upon us.
Thank God. Yes, thank God.
And so I decided I was going to deconstruct the Christmas story.
Okay.
Here's what I came up with.
All right.
It would not have been a barn. It would not have been a barn.
Interesting. Okay.
Not a barn. It was actually from what I have and through some of the research I've done, it would have most likely have been the first floor of a home. Okay. Back then, the first floor was technically for the animals. The people lived above them.
Oh,
okay. So the room was, again, there would have been animals. All right. I'm not going to discredit that fact. Animals would have been there. It would have most likely have been a barn-ish setting, but it was not a barn off on the hillside.
Yeah, that was not.
No,
Definitely
it was not a like that, and
because it was in town. It was inside.
It was
Bethlehem.
in town,
yes.
right? In town. The first floor of most homes back then was for the animals. Was for their transportation. That'd be like their garage, right? Donkeys, horses.
Also, I mean, I know we don't think of it this way. It provided heat for the house too.
Yes, exactly.
Because they're warm.
So they would have most likely been living on the first floor, having this scene take place on the first floor of someone's home. All right, so there we go.
But again, let's be clear. We're not meaning where the living room and the TV are. We're still talking very barn-like.
Yeah.
But it would just be on the bottom floor, and the family would live upstairs.
In the living room, the bedrooms, the house, everything would be up top.
Yeah, and if it was an inn, what they would have is some guest rooms upstairs.
Actually, another reason it was designed like that is because if you have your animals all underneath, it was the first source of indoor plumbing. You just had a hole literally in the ground, and you would go to the bathroom, and it would just go right to where the animals were doing their own things. That was another fun fact I learned through some of my research.
Parker has a different definition of fun than me.
So anyways, all right, so it would have been kind of in the city, right? Of course, not off and on the hills in some random barn. And the star would have been there. However, I cannot tell you that the star would look like the star that we depict today.
Yeah, the 5-pointed star or whatever, yeah.
Massive glowing image right above the manger. I mean, like 10 feet above the manger. No.
Yeah, it's not that.
Way up in the sky, I assume. Way up in the sky, we can most definitely confirm that. Yeah. All right? It was way up there. And sure, it was shining bright. Sure, it was something, unique.
And, it was different. It wasn't different. Where it belonged.
That's why these wise men were able to get there. Right?
That's why they recognized it as something.
They were studying the sky, and they noticed, oh, well, that's the one that the prophecy foretold. And then they went. And so, yeah, we would have had a shepherd there. We would have also have had several other people that we never include in the Christmas story, such as Joe Schmo, who's walking down the street. Okay, I mean, they were in town. There were things taking place. It was the census was being taken up, so everyone was gathering close into the city of Bethlehem. It would have been if the inn was packed. Imagine what the city was like. So you have Mary and Joseph who are trying to find shelter.
Yeah. In a place with no security.
Yep. In a place with no security. All right. In the bottom of someone's house where they are, releasing their bowel movements right from the ceiling that they are under. Okay. Honestly, this is the imagery. All right. And so you have Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus, possibly a shepherd, and then the entire town was there. All right. Literally the entire village had to have seen this take place for countless reasons. The innkeeper would have said, oh, yeah, there's that woman who just birthed her child in the barn next door. That's usual. I mean, it's the whole image here.
And part of what Parker's, I know you were on a gross scene here, the sermon yesterday, but one of the purposes of the shepherds showing up, being called there at all, was to provide some security, because there was no security down there. No. And so for the shepherds to be there would have given them a measure of security that they would not have had. For them to say, okay, we recognize the Messiah, because, the glowing guy told them about that. But for them to be there and say, okay, we're believers, now we're going to watch out for you, would have been a wonderful gift on that night.
One reason also, to add on to what Tim was saying, they were technically foreigners back in their hometown. That would be as if, I left and everyone who was from St. Mary's ever came back. Those people that just came back, it would be weird, okay? It'd be very bizarre. All right, so Jesus and Mary and Joseph were all coming back to this town that was technically foreign to them, even though it was where they technically resided.
Live there. Yeah.
So
I mean, they wouldn't have had to travel there if they lived there. So clearly they didn't live there. Yeah.
Then we have the wise men. Now the wise men, as the nativity scene in everyone's front yard depicts, were there. They were there in the so-called barn when Jesus was laying in a manger, and Mary and Joseph. Somehow, I don't understand this either about this nativity scene story. Mary has just as nice of clothes as the wise men. How do we get that? That wouldn't have been real either. This beautiful blue and white gown that she's in. Probably not.
Yeah. We're talking some majorly different social statuses, even between the shepherds and the wise men, let alone Mary and Joseph and the rest of them. Yeah,
absolutely. And then the wise men, all right? They're depicted there. However, read Scripture and specifically Matthew's account of the Christmas story of the Nativity story, which is where the wise men take place. It says, "And the wise men came into the home and greeted the child, saw the child, and then from there they proceeded to just, give their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." Translate that. Now they're no longer in this barn, they're in a home. And Jesus is not referred to, when you translate it back to the Greek, it was always baby. At least in Luke's gospel, it was baby. And even at the beginning of Matthew's gospel, it was infant. Infant is actually what it is. Now we switch the terminology to child.
Yep.
Jesus might be of toddler age now.
And if you continue reading, when the wise men go and talk to Herod, Herod's like, "When did the star show up?" It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what it says, because all the babies or children, infants, whatever, 2 years and younger are what he killed, because that was the timetable. So that's how long we're talking about here.
So Jesus would have been anywhere from, by the time the wise men showed up, and I'm going to use this large time frame only because we can't necessarily prove anything. It would have been 40 days, between 40 days after Jesus' birth, or 3 to 2 years after Jesus' birth. That's what it would have been. So,
and they were not still in the barn at that
why
time.
The wise men are depicted as in the barn with Mary and Jesus, who is freshly born, not necessarily a true story. Even though everyone would like to think it was just this incredible, epic journey for all of them to come together at one time, it would have taken years. The wise men came from the east, right?
That's it. We don't know where from. The Orient somewhere.
So we're assuming the east. However, if it was going to be a neighboring town, we could maybe, put that into Scripture. But no, they said the wise men came from the east.
If they would have been from the area that was under Herod's control, Herod would not have given them the time of day, because they would have been his subjects. So clearly they're not. Them coming in from a foreign place, he'd be like, "Well, these foreigners are here. Maybe I should talk to them." That would have given them access to Herod.
Yep. Okay. That's a good point. What I'm trying to explain here is sometimes in the faith, in Christianity, we have let society take our stories and kind of make them into these beautiful Hallmark images. And as a result of that, when people in the faith find out that, whoa, that's not true, that's not accurate at all.
The shepherds and wise men never met each other.
What happens is people start to find that, because again, they would be baby Christians, people weak in their faith would find that and say, "This is all wrong. This is all falsehood. It's not right."
And literally, in this case, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Because what has happened is people have started to believe that society has the right interpretation of the Bible. So when the Bible doesn't line up with the society standard of the Nativity story and the Christmas story, well, then what people are going to say is, well, I'm going to go with society's input rather than what the Bible says. And we know when we explain
the track record is horrible. Yes.
Yeah, the track record is horrible.
Yeah.
But that's what happens, and people then decide,
especially in this case, which is a completely harmless example that we're talking about.
But it happens. I can't tell you how many people have said, the Nativity story isn't like that at all. Correct. You're absolutely correct.
Absolutely right.
And
I can remember the first time I realized that the shepherds and wise men, what we're talking about here today. I was actually in college at the time, and so I was older than Parker is now.
Getting an education.
Yeah, and I can remember reading this and going, all of a sudden realizing the shepherds and wise men aren't even in the same gospel together. I didn't know that until then. And I remember reading that and thinking, and for a while it threw me for a loop, because I was used to the Hallmark image as well. And because I had done exactly what you said. I had bought in society's picture. That's what I'd seen my entire life. And
that's what your church maybe probably put out in the front yard,
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And that ended up throwing me off, because obviously it didn't throw me completely off because I'm still here, but it for a while I had to struggle with that. It's like, well, now what is true and what is accurate, and once you get down to those questions, if you're not ready for that conversation and you get there, it's like trying to have an in-depth conversation with a 4-year-old. They're not emotionally ready for some heavier topics.
It would literally be like, I have a lot of little cousins and nieces and nephews and things. They love Christmas. Why? Because there's this little elf that comes into their homes, all right, this elf on the shelf thing, and it makes these kids so
I'm waiting to hear what word is
I'm trying to figure out how I can say this politely. It's very bizarre. I don't know how I feel about the elf on the shelf thing, only because you're making your children actually believe that plastic
action figure,
toy, that action figure is a true person. So much to the point that if they were to dare touch the action figure, Christmas is ruined. And the elf lost all of its power, and they just killed a physical being because they touched this thing. So it's a little bit weird, all right? We're not going to get into that today.
We here at the Raised Podcast, we love taking things to extreme ends, though. That's true.
Well, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to deconstruct society.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, actually, there are some people who are probably like, "Where's the elf on the shelf in the barn?"
Yeah. But I mean, we create this image. Even I was giving the example. Kids with the elf on the shelf and with Santa. You tell them that Santa doesn't exist. Well, then they have to be like, "Well, what do you mean? Where are all these presents from?" Mm-hmm. You tell a Christian that the wise men and the shepherds weren't there. What do you mean? The church has it right out in the front yard. What are you talking about? That's and as a result of that, it makes them start to have to question. And what my generation and what a lot of people, I can't even just say my generation, but if some people have to start to question something, they're going to just give up on it because they rather not put in the time and effort.
And that's it. You're exactly right. People won't take the time to go back and check the stories to understand why they exist. Why does that Hallmark image exist? Because it encapsulates the whole thing. Yes, it may not be historically accurate, but it depicts something that's true. There were wise men that showed up. There were shepherds that was there. It was all around the birth of the Messiah, and that's what's important. And just because it'd be too difficult to be like, well, now we have to have 2 nativity scenes. Here's Jesus at 2, and here's, because we do this, we're trying to represent the birth of the Messiah, which is actually the point of the story. The shepherds and wise men are details, not the center.
Yes.
And Parker, you're 100% correct. And that's not just a Gen Z problem. That's a everybody problem. Is once you get challenged, it's just too much work to go figure it out, and that's where the problem comes in.
Because they will not actually go. Even it could be as easy as what we're talking about today. This isn't a very hard subject. From some of the several others in Scripture.
Yeah. There's not even a controversy.
There's really not a controversy when you open up and you actually go to some of those more difficult passages in Scripture. Don't even try to get to them because there's several people that I know of that have struggled with this idea of the Christmas story and the nativity story. And once you have to, because here's what I have a hard time, and this is maybe the young pastor in me coming out, is the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, is probably the most accurate statement for many of the situations I get myself in.
Because it requires some perseverance, which requires some intestinal fortitude.
You can tell someone everything they need, but if they don't start to actually question it to where they can get to process it on their own, you're just wasting your time.
And have the tools to pursue it.
Yeah. But you see, I can tell whoever is watching this video today that what we just depict about the nativity story, okay? Now they can hear that and say, well, Christianity is just a big contradiction from the very beginning, and I'm not going to do any more pursuing into figuring anything out along those lines of that story and what it actually means and all these things. It is a mix of laziness and arrogance.
Well, and I think you're 100% correct, and I'll add one more piece to that, is we realize that when we're dealing with faith is, it's a pursuit, it's a journey, and we're supposed to be challenged, because if you're not challenged, you're going to be 50 years old and still doing the elf on the shelf.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's the problem is it requires growth. When I found out that the Christmas story doesn't exist in the Bible any place like it's depicted, that was a difficult thing for me. Now, I mean, you watch Parker and I sitting here, we're chuckling about it, not laughing at it, but we're laughing about it. Because I've grown. I've grown past that and realized the point of the story is the birth of the Messiah. The rest of it's just details. And I think once we get bogged down in the details, there are ample places in the Bible where if you're going to get bogged down on the details, you're never going to get past that and realize what the point of the story is.
What Tim said, well, then you become the 50-year-old who still believes in the elf on the shelf. True, but what actually happens is, well, then you just throw out the whole idea of the elf on the shelf. Let's compare the elf on the shelf as the faith.
Okay.
The faith takes some form of concepts and it takes some growth and it's constantly being discovered and it constantly requires you to be questioning and growing and studying and all these things. Well, instead of having to do all that, well, then it just doesn't exist. It doesn't work. It doesn't operate. It's all make believe.
Just cancel it.
Just cancel it. Yep. And so you become this person who has no greater ties to anything. Yeah. You become an unmotivated, dull, joyless, hopeless individual, like so many people in this world today are. I was watching a Fox News segment. All right, that we're gonna go a little side subject here, and it was talking about how college doesn't seem fun anymore, right? Okay.
Actually, from where I'm standing, it doesn't look fun anymore.
Going on and on and on and on and on about how you see these kids and they look depressed, they look awful because all my generation does is wear sweatpants and shorts. You will never find me wearing gym shorts or sweatpants in a public setting unless I'm actually working out. Right? I pride myself upon that. Anyways.
However, cargo shorts are fine.
Cargo shorts are fine, absolutely. Are you kidding me? It's like khakis.
Yeah.
But anyways, we dress dull, we look depressed, we are depressed, we're struggling. So many people in my generation have to be medicated to find any sense of happiness and joy. And why is that?
I have a theory. What's yours?
I think the theory is because we've lost all sense of actual hope because we aren't willing to put in the force of work to have it. The faith today, as I just mentioned, and as several Christians and believers around the world know, it requires quite a bit out of you.
Yeah.
And people aren't willing to make that commitment.
Well, I think people get it wrong in this way. People think one of the biggest controversies going right now is pronouns. Actually, pronouns are not the big problem. Prepositions are the problem now. Because what a lot of people, and it's not just Parker's generation, this is a big problem. People don't want freedom of speech. They want freedom from speech. And that's two very different things. And that doesn't allow you to get pushed on anything. Like I bet there are some people who would watch this video, you and I talking about this, and would be offended that we would even bring this up. Because we would just rather close it off and be like, that doesn't exist, rather than just facing the fact that it does, and what does that mean? And what can we learn from it? And that's a real shame. We would rather, ignore it or cancel it than deal with it. And that's a sad state of affair. And that's what leads us to, well, suddenly I've now canceled 3/5 of my life. I can't deal with it anymore because I can't come to any determination about it. So now my life is myopic. It's just right here. There's nothing else. And that is depressing. And I think that leads to a lot of the issues that you and I are talking about here today.
You become King David when writing Ecclesiastes. Solomon, sorry, yeah, Solomon. I was thinking about the Psalms for a second.
Yeah.
King Solomon when writing Ecclesiastes. And he says some pretty dark language there.
Yes,
however, he had and kept hope the entire time from one source, right? That was his faith, that was the God that he served, and all these things. Now what we have is everyone's writing these sad remarks, but they have no sense of
redemption.
Hope. No redemption. Yeah. There's no sign that this will ever get better or that this all is worth something.
Because when we find out the shepherds and wise men never met each other, we cancel the whole thing. And that's the problem we're running into.
Because we hate to ask questions. We hate to make ourselves find answers.
Do the work it takes, and it does. I mean that's what faith is faith is seeking understanding. And that doesn't mean we're ever going to comprehend the whole thing, but it does mean it's a journey, and a journey requires effort and work. The thing that so many people today are... I think a lot of people have convinced themselves that discomfort is just not a part of life. And if you're feeling discomfort, it means you're doing it wrong. That is 1,000% the opposite of what it actually is.
Anything that causes you to feel discomfort, just cut it out then.
Yeah.
Faith makes you very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I am oftentimes uncomfortable in certain, preparing for certain sermons, studying certain Bible topics. It makes me question whether what I believe in is actually true. Right? Yeah. I'm sure Tim sometimes has some of those many encounters in his life, even being a veteran pastor for so many years,
Yeah.
You have those questions that make you feel uncomfortable saying, well, I could be a little bit off here,
Yeah.
So then you dig these questions.
But you dig into it and work and study and pray and begin to work on these things. And that's how your faith grows. It's like working out your body. It's the same principle.
Yep.
And if you don't do that work, if you just cancel it instead, then you're getting no benefit from it at all. There's no growth in that. I mean, think about all the people that Jesus aggravated in his life. I mean, we're talking lots of people. I mean, he was murdered, by the way. I mean, we need to keep that in mind. They had to crucify him for some reasons because they didn't like him. Because he pushed him too hard and they would rather cancel it than deal with it. And that's how he ended up there. And I think that too many times, that's what we want to do is we just want to put it aside and not let it, tip our apple cart over. Understanding that in life, if we go the easy route all the time, you end up driving in a circle. And that's why a lot of people are depressed now, is their lives aren't going anywhere because they won't accept or won't face challenge of any kind whatsoever. That's a shame. So that's what we hope you get out of this episode. I had no idea where we're going with this, but that's what we hope you get out of this, is do the work. Yeah, there's some challenging things in the Bible. Parker and I picked one today that doesn't even register on the scale. It's so small. Mm-hmm. But we picked this out as an example today to help you see that it is through these challenges that we grow. And we develop our understanding, and things that bother us today won't bother us tomorrow, because there'll be new stuff to bother us tomorrow. But we will never go beyond where we are. We'll continue driving in that depressing circle if we just say, I don't want to be challenged, so I'm just going to continue to make these turns all the time, the same turns every time, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going literally nowhere.
I feel like that what's crazy is, I think now that when I start to actually look at my life and a lot of those things, I feel like oftentimes I play the devil's advocate with myself, because I want to have something to chase after. I want to naturally, even though, watch with social media today, you can see countless people with other opinions. Yeah. I want to find out their opinion, and I want to figure out why I still believe what I believe is true.
You do that instead of contacting the administrator and saying, we got to ban this guy.
Yep.
There's two different approaches.
Yes. So many people will just say, oh, I don't agree with this, I'm going to block this person. When rather, this person's saying this, but I believe this. Why do I still believe this? What against his opinion versus
It's not about proving him wrong. It's about establishing your own faith, and that's what's so important.
Yep.
And I think that's what's lacking today. All right, everybody. I had no idea where this was going. I didn't know where we were starting, and now we're here. So I appreciate you guys all coming out to be a part of this, and keep fighting the good fight, because that's the way we grow.
And take the wise men out of your nativity scene.